A very warm welcome back to your latest industry news. From Air New Zealand grounding updates to Korean Air trying to find ways to mitigate engine problems. Why not begin there? Korean Air is just another airline that is continuing to be hit by the ongoing engine crisis that is plaguing our aviation industry. However, through a new agreement, it's trying to find ways to mitigate the overall impact on its business. As part of the airline's plans to be more robust in the future and have greater control over its day-to-day operations, it has acquired the right to maintain aircraft engines from Rolls-Royce. Furthermore, the benefits will stretch to just the airline in essence, which will now play a heavy role in the ongoing maintenance procedure of these. This will be achieved through the new engine maintenance plant, which is expected to be constructed in and around Incheon and will be able to handle a significant amount of annual volume. Again, to reiterate, giving Korean Air greater control. That new plant that I speak of was actually announced earlier this year, and the airline aims to expand the facility over time. However, overall, there will be a great focus on the MRO business with your repair and general aircraft maintenance. The fact that also engine work can be conducted here is just a massive positive. The engine crisis that I speak of is one that has hurt airlines around the world for quite some time, and the reality is it hasn't just been limited to, say, Rolls-Royce. That could be extended towards Pratt & Whitney and others alike, with the varying degree of damage done, certainly not all the same. Airlines such as Korean Air have expressed their frustrations over the crisis, largely due to the uncertainty of when works would be concluded and when engines would arrive back in their own hands. Obviously, it's frustrating that engines are having issues, period, but it's that uncertainty that makes it very difficult to forecast and plan. Korean Air believes that this new maintenance facility and agreement with Rolls-Royce will help it gain greater control over the fate of its engines, which we know to be a critical component of the company's day-to-day business, for without them, these planes wouldn't be getting in the air. The deal with Rolls-Royce is viewed as a groundbreaking one, as most of the industry doesn't actually have agreements with engine manufacturers to allow them to take control over their maintenance work. Over 90% of the aviation industry must have their engines transported to licensed facilities, approved by the engine manufacturer, and this is where supply chains are crumbling, resulting in airlines around the world hurting because of a misunderstanding of when engines will return to them. Furthermore, Korean Air's decision to address this now rather than later comes as other airlines don't believe the crisis will ease anytime soon. In fact, some are forecasting improvements to be seen in maybe the early part of 2026. That'll be a focal point for the next topic in this recap, but there is a great deal of uncertainty, and there is the problem. Even if things do start to stabilize once more, say in the next 18 months, the continued knock-on effect will be felt for a considerable period after, and Korean Air are trying to shape their future, so if this was to happen again, they would try and not be hurt as dearly. Over to Air New Zealand. I'd argue to you that they've probably been one of the more unlucky carriers over the last decade in regards to exterior issues impacting their aircraft and leading to groundings. As the flag carrier published its latest half-year earning guidance, they also provided us with an update on those all-important aircraft groundings that we know to have been affecting the business in the last, say, year or so. In the release, Air New Zealand stated that availability issues will begin easing in the early stages of 2026, which comes much later than what would ideally happen. Obviously, in an ideal world, none of this would have occurred, but Air New Zealand deep down would have been hoping that they would have had a resolution found far sooner. Air New Zealand says that the very aircraft availability that I am speaking about stems solely from the global engine crisis, which is taking no prisoners, and not directly impacting, again, I'll reiterate, one sole engine manufacturer, but rather many. It is all the supply chains that have crumbled. Unfortunately, the airline happens to just have two of the aircraft that have been the most impacted in recent times, ranging from the A320neo family to the 787. Funnily enough, these two types were meant to form an important pillar of the airline's future single-aisle and wide-body network. However, their entry into service has been anything but smooth, and I'll reiterate that once all this smoothens out, these planes are going to be fantastic for the company, but they certainly have been a bit of that problem child since arriving. Air New Zealand says that maintenance delays related to the engine crisis have seen up to 6 of their A320neo family jets out of service across the first half of the financial year, impacting its ability to offer capacity to critical markets and also causing frequency reductions. This a very big thing to note. While 6 aircraft may not necessarily seem like a lot, and I'm not saying Air New Zealand is, say, a niche company, they are certainly not with the likes of, say, United that have hundreds upon hundreds of aircraft. Those 6 units are still very important for their day-to-day flying and do have a profound impact. If we're moving our way up to some of your larger planes, well, the 787 has also been affected, with the flag carrier stating that up to 4 of its Dreamliners have largely been pulled from service to try and cope with all of this. There is a great deal of uncertainty about when engines will return, alongside the plan for maintenance, which means forecasting these engines' arrival and then the re-entry into service of the affected aircraft has proved challenging. The grounded aircraft have also represented an over 16% reduction in its available jet-powered fleet, which has a negative impact on its ability to serve the domestic and international markets year-round, but also especially during your peak travel seasons, where airlines, if anything, would want to be trying to increase their global route network rather than, say, make necessary reductions to try and cope with the loss of capacity, again, driven by those engine difficulties that we are witnessing. While all these impacts have been global, and Air New Zealand shouldn't feel that they're the only ones impacted, they've certainly had it tough. Air New Zealand may feel it's been one of the more unlucky ones of the last decade. It was hit during the late 2010s, you may recall, with the Rolls-Royce Trent 1000 durability issues that led to them grounding 787s and moving forward with the wet lease agreements that needed to be signed. While all these impacts have been colossal, Air New Zealand has tried to find ways to mitigate these circumstances, again through those leasing agreements. The leasing market presents equal risk but also opportunity. It's a means for a company to limit capacity loss from grounded aircraft, but it can cost more and obviously is not the most optimal means to move forward. The engine crisis that I speak of is resulting in many airlines cutting growth expectations and cutting their route network in a bid to manage their available fleet. Thai Airways recently went on the record discussing the engine crisis and the impact on its 787 Dreamliners, pointing to the uncertainty around when engines would return from the maintenance factory. Obviously, when you're running an airline or a business for any matter, you'll know that something most likely will go wrong at a certain point in time, and while that can be frustrating when it hits, if you're prepared for that, things become a little bit easier. But see, for these companies that are battling engine difficulties, yes, the problem at hand is frustrating, but again, I'll reiterate to the timeframes that are becoming more challenging. For example, the Thailand-based company stated that engines would typically take 90 days to return back to them, but now the number is ballooning towards 120, and this makes it very hard to plan for the re-entry into service and is draining their finances. I'd love to hear your take down below in the comments. Thanks a bunch for your support here on the channel. It certainly does mean a lot. Please take care, do be safe, and I'll see you same place, same time tomorrow for your latest industry news.